Okay, we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. I'd like to welcome everybody to the June 13th meeting of the City of Brentwood Planning and Zoning Commission. If you'll please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Sherry Bilderbeck.
Here.
Michael Daming.
Here.
Mafaza.
Here.
Michael Hart.
Here.
Rebecca Jacobs.
Here.
Paul Moran.
Here.
Hart Nelson.
Here.
John Demers is here. Lisa Sherling.
Here.
Tom Shipley.
Here.
We have a quorum, Mr. Chairman.
Very good, and the commission will be advised that we now have a constitution of 12 members. So our membership has dwindled by 2. So it's the best and the brightest. But we only need 7 to have a quorum nowadays. Has everybody had an opportunity to review the April 11th, 2018 meeting minutes? Are there any revisions to said minutes? Seeing none, we will approve those by acclamation unless there's an objection. Okay, approved. No old business, new business. We have 2 items. One is election of officers. The commission will recall that we typically would take nominations in May and then additional nominations in June and vote in June. We did not have a meeting in May after our marathon early 2018, so we're going to try to knock both these out today. If that's acceptable to the commission, I think we're actually obligated to do that by our code. So with that, we have 3 officers that we need to elect. The vice chair, Clint, is no longer the vice chair, so it's of particular importance. But whoever wants to make nominations or serve in this forthcoming year, are there any nominations for chairman? Ms. Bilderbeck.
Michael Daming.
Okay, happy to be nominated. Any other nominations for chair? All right, any nominations for vice chair? Ms. Schuring?
Tom Shipley.
Mr. Shipley, do you accept the nomination?
Sure.
I'd like to hear a rousing yes.
Sure. That's not a resign.
Would it be inappropriate to point out that we're only one half-naked photograph away from Tom Shipley assuming the chair?
That is a wholly inappropriate comment.
Okay,
there,
sorry, in
Mr.
that case,
Moran.
that comment is withdrawn.
I think to strike that from the record. Are there any other nominations for vice chair? Okay, and are there any nominations for secretary? Yeah, Ms. Bilderbeck.
John Nurnberger.
Mr. Nurnberger, do you accept?
Yes.
Okay. Are there any other nominations for secretary? All right. Seeing none, we'll close nominations, and in light of there being 3 nominations for 3 positions, is there any objection to approving that slate by acclamation? No. All right, seeing none, that slate will be approved. Thank you to those who agreed to accept the nomination. All right.
Then Tom's take over the meeting now. Okay, right?
I quit.
That's what you wanted, I thought.
Right. All right, we have 1 item tonight, which is an amendment to the conditional use permit pertaining to outdoor storage at the Home Depot. And is the applicant here? Okay, sir, if you could please step forward to the podium and introduce yourself and what you are asking the commission to approve.
Thank you, Commission, for having me. I'm Dan Zoldak with Lars Anderson Associates, representing Home Depot. We've applied for a CUP for tool, exact words for it is the outdoor sales of the rental of the tool equipment area that's identified on the site plan. We've worked with staff, and I think they reviewed parking, and I'm here for any other questions. The application kind of goes over the different tool rental things that are in the equipment area, including tractor, backhoe, skid steers, mini excavators and trenchers, whatnot.
So
And they're actually out there today. So if you've driven by the site, you'll actually see what they look like.
So currently, you are in violation of your permit, correct?
Correct, that we were notified by the city several months ago, and this is I guess, a reaction to the notification.
Okay. Ms. Kirkemeyer, staff report?
Sure. So just to give you a little bit of background, the Home Depot has been a thriving store here in Brentwood since 1996 was when it was constructed. And in 1995, the process was pretty similar as we have today. They applied for a conditional use permit for the outdoor display and for the operation of the retail center for Home Depot, and they were granted conditional use permit approval back in 1995. Subsequently, then the store was built the following year in 1996. And I included the ordinance from 1995 in your packet. So as you all know, CUP can either just be approved as it's presented, it can be approved with conditions, or denied. So the ordinance spells out conditions of approval. And for the most part, you know, I think they've been able to stay within the confines of those original conditions. The one, though, that I would draw your attention to is the parking. And the parking back then, I'm not sure what the requirements were. They did calculate the parking back then. I can tell you how they decided to calculate it for the Home Depot store. I'm not sure what the actual parking requirements were. But they took an equation based on the amount of square floor area for gross floor area of the store, and then also a separate calculation for the number of employees at the peak shift. So at that time, when it was approved, they calculated, 500 and was it 80 some spaces? 558 spaces. So that is really grossly overestimated. So I don't have a concern really that they're not meeting the 558 mark. And actually what had also transpired since the store was built in 2010, some of you might remember that, at one point there was a proposal, and the McDonald's restaurant and already the Lion's Choice restaurant was built, but back in 2010, Home Depot was considering taking the rest of the frontage there along Hanley and maybe looking at creating a separate outlot for another restaurant at that time. And that never materialized, but when we thought that possibly there would be another creation of a restaurant on the Home Depot parcel, they did a parking study. We had CBB at the time, also on retainer, who did the parking study, and it was determined that really, even for peak for the Home Depot store, that 340 parking spaces was an acceptable number. So it wouldn't, like I said, it does not bother me that they don't have the 558 spaces outlined in the original CUP. But as I said, I think they've been able to stay pretty compliant with the original conditions. However, though, Home Depot over the years has tried to offer different products and services to its customers. And one of the things that's matured with almost all the Home Depot stores is getting into this rental equipment. And it started out that they were doing like more small equipment rental, and now it's kind of blossomed into large equipment rental. And as what was stated as part of the petitioner's application, included kind of a list of things now that they also offer by rental. So this property is zoned planned development, and our code says under the conditional uses for planned development, it separates out the sales and rental of equipment. So where I'm coming from this is that the original CUP didn't allow for this expansion from the Home Depot use into this large rental equipment market. So we brought it to their attention. We said if you wanted to keep it as part of the store, your CUP would have to be amended. And so they were willing to comply with that. We did actually let it go for a couple of months, because the thought was is we would wait and have them apply for this in the springtime when there would be like the most activity possible going on at the Home Depot site. So I think if you look at the photos, and again, I know you shop there, you're familiar with the store, but what you see right now is probably, I don't know if I want to say the worst case scenario, but it probably is like where the most activity, would be seasonal activity for the Home Depot. So what's before you tonight is consideration then to amend the site development plan, which they provided with us to show the locations of the large equipment storage outdoor display. And then also consideration to allow them to keep renting the large equipment, because right now, as I said, that would be non-compliant with their CUP.
So, Ms. Kirkemeyer, the permit currently allows Home Depot to have the very same equipment that we're talking about outside for storage purposes, correct?
The large equipment?
Yes.
No, that would be non-compliant. They would be in violation currently of that. That what it says in the, and again, the reason why is because the equipment rental is specified individually as another use permitted by conditional use in that zoning district. So although there is a provision in the original CUP for outdoor display, it's the expansion of that for the equipment rental that's not permitted by this CUP, covered by the CUP.
So I see the permit currently allows them outdoor storage and display of materials in front of the Home Depot building, right?
Materials, correct.
Okay. So you don't believe the equipment is the same thing as materials?
It would be maybe a more difficult call, but again, when you see that the plan development actually breaks out, because outdoor display is permitted by conditional use in the PD, but then also 2 lines below, equipment rental is specified individually as needing a CUP in the plan development district.
Okay, fair enough. So the issue is storage versus rental and materials versus equipment. Discussion. Mr. Nelson?
Mr. Chairman, and so I had actually the same question as you on, I guess, subsection F of the original ordinance. And I guess the other question I have is on parking. That's not something we're being asked to consider a change. Because the original ordinance has, what is it, the 558? And I take a look at the report here, it says there's 384 available. So that's not something that we're being asked to consider, if I understand correctly.
Yes, I would recommend that if you're going to consider amending the CUP, because they're not compliant with the original CUP.
So they're not compliant on both, so we would want, okay.
Right.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
But to the second point, we had a traffic engineer that concluded that 340 spaces were sufficient, correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Mr. Nuremberger?
Well, just drove the site before the meeting. A little confused or whatever. You have on the map that we were given, there's a green area that's big and then what is that? You're gonna be putting those equipment?
I
in
think
those
that was
little-
a representation of when Lisa went out there of what parking spaces were being taken up at that
Okay.
current time. You know, this being springtime was the maximum
So
garden.
where is the equipment gonna be
The
stored?
equipment actually is marked on the site plan labeled in the front of the store where it is today.
Okay,
So it's in the.
well, it's taking up some of those parking spots right now.
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that's what you plan to have it out there displayed on a regular basis, correct?
Correct.
One of the comments I have is right now on the south side or whatever, in the back, you have equipment, you have materials, you have all kinds of things in those areas right now, not in.
But that's not for rent.
What's that?
That's not rental. The
I
rental
know,
area.
but
yeah,
it's
okay.
supplies for your store.
Yes, correct.
Yeah. So how much outdoor storage are we gonna allow? And by the way, I love the fact I use the store all the time. I wanna keep you successful in Brentwood. I just wanna make sure I understand what we're gonna allow outside of the building. Because you have a lot of plantings, you have a lot of materials, you have fencing, you have all kinds of things, kind of haphazardly around the whole store, in the back and the side. So I just want to make sure we have some understanding of what we're going to allow once we agree to do this. I think we should agree to do this. I think we need to have a little bit more information about what we're going to actually do for the site. So that's my comments. Thank you.
Ms. Bilderback?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's true that back in the day, this was one of the first things that we did before even the promenade came along. And our parking requirements were a lot more and unnecessarily stringent, and today's things have changed a lot, and so they were really outdated. So the parking thing makes sense, and with the study, you know, the 340 requirement. One concern I do have, and I would just echo the comments of Mr. Nurnberger, is the location that's proposed that I understand is being used for the large equipment being at the front of the site. I mean, I remember when we first approved the Home Depot site, there were some concerns by folks about appearance and the fact that there was going to be, you know, McDonald's and Lions Choice and what was it going to look like, and we were like, well, you know, it's a hardware place, you know, it's this sort of a thing. So it was approved, but by putting heavy equipment at the front, it sort of, I mean, it definitely, I think, would detract from the look of the location further than the various materials and things, kind of, as Mr. Nurnberger had stated, being in different places. And that's something that I'd like to visit a little bit more, like what the options are for having that, like why here right at the front of the footage, right by the road. I mean, normally we try to have a street frontage look somewhat appealing, and putting heavy equipment there for rental doesn't really seem to fit in that view. It would seem to worsen the look of the site. So that's something that I'd like to discuss a little bit more. And I don't have the answer.
Yeah, I mean, Mr. Zolbak, do you really need to have, if we let you keep the rental materials and rental equipment up here at right in front of the store rather than up here by Hanley Road, is that sufficient?
Obviously, the stalls right in front of the store are most valuable for the customer, and so getting them easy access to the store is priority one to the store. But I'm sure there is a spot that could work for both sides that we can find. You know, right in front of the store is probably not ideal for us. I'm assuming the store manager, this is a new product they're having, and they want to kind of get it out there that they have this product, and that's probably why they put it dead center, to let everybody know they have this product. But yeah, moving it in a different location is definitely.
Mr. Nurnberger?
I would just recommend putting it where the 40 is on the south side, where you already use all that parking spaces for outdoor materials right now, because I just went there. So it's completely full of, not being used for parking at all. It's used for planting material,
That was my
like
thought.
trees and that sort of thing. So it's like, I think it should be away from the outside, actually the front of the building. It should be on the side.
Rather than by Hanley Road, you think it should be on the
Right.
south of the building?
Yes,
Yeah, I agree with
behind
that.
the Lions Choice.
Right.
Yes.
Mr. Moran?
Yeah, so I get the business plan of like having these things up front, and we're not going to, you know, try to mess with your operations too much. But I think what would certainly work, if we have to keep it where it is can we make somewhat of an effort to make it slightly more visually appealing, as opposed to a bunch of concrete-filled buckets, a bit of rebar, and some tape going around it. This looks very, you know, temporary. And to Ms. Bildervik's point, you know, we are trying to have an aesthetically better Brentwood along all the major arteries and roads. Is there any intent to make this a more permanent structure once this is formalised and approved, and carve it off as the rental area with some kind of fencing or signage that's appropriate?
There's no plan as of today, but obviously we're taking input from the city today to see what your thoughts are. I mean, if we move it behind the building, I'd not
That would be less
necessarily
necessary,
see
right.
that. But if I'm allowed to put it up front, then yeah, I think they would be willing to do some type of fencing that would be more architectural pleasing than those buckets.
Do you not think that would be better? Isn't that better for a business standpoint as well?
It's Home Depot. People are coming there to rent
People don't
tools
care.
and not look at you know. But yeah, we've done stuff in the past, and I think we're you know willing to do stuff to keep the store look that you guys want.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Fafaza?
Well, I completely understand why they have the spaces where they are up front. I mean, like you said, the door is right next to the garden center, and when I go to Home Depot every weekend, you know, the places where they have this rental equipment, those are the last parking spots ever to be used. So having it there makes complete sense from a business model. I do understand it's right along Hanley Road, but, I mean, that is an industrial area, and this is a giant hardware store. It's not, you know, that people are going there to buy tools, rent equipment, get dirty. They're not there to, you know, look pretty. As far as putting it on the south side, I know that's just an extension of the garden center in the spring and summer, and that's just the pedestrian area, and I don't know if you want people towing heavy equipment out from behind all your garden areas where, you know, there's plenty of people just walking around.
Yeah, that whole area, not just the parking stalls, is
Yeah,
basically
it's-
taken up right now with
Yeah, it's an
seasonal
extension of
sales.
the garden center. It's plants.
This time of year.
Yeah, this time of year. In the winter, obviously, nothing's there, or it's storage, but
People aren't doing construction in the winter either.
And Ms. Kirkemeyer, Mr. Nuremberger had raised that issue. Is there storage of these annual flowers they put out there? Isn't that in violation of the permit?
Unfortunately, when it was approved back in '95, I mean, you can read the condition as well in the ordinance. It was vague. I mean, it did talk about that the display area never gave an amount, never had a depiction of where, but it talks about it being in the front of the building in the parking area. So if I say front of the building in the parking area, then really where the nursery materials are to the south of that, I don't think that was the intent, the way that condition was written, that area should be used up for nursery materials.
It used to be out front.
Mr. Nuremberger?
Are these the three, whatever, 64, 84 that you said, the parking spaces, does that include the south side parking spaces that they're showing?
Yes,
They're not being used for parking at all right now.
correct.
So we can't add that into the use of having that many spaces if they're not using it for parking at all. They
So-
covered 70% of the time, probably not, maybe 50% or whatever. So to me, I can add that into the next about using those spaces. It's all stuff in front. Thank you.
Mr. Nelson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Question, and I hate to bring up competitors, but since we have two right in that area, are they offering a similar service of rental, and do they have displays out in
I'm
the
not
parking lot?
aware of the
Can I
competitors, what they're
drive by?
doing.
Does anyone know?
Ms. Kirkemeyer?
I did look into it. Lowe's was a no, and Menards has some equipment rental. I think what sets Home Depot apart, though, is that they have gotten into the large equipment rental. So again, the things that are still equipment rental, like at Menards, were still smaller pieces of equipment and apparatus. And either it's all inside the store or probably in their, like, large, yes, yeah, kind of their lumber center, if you would, or something, so.
They have the whole outside area blocked off in Menards. If you've ever been there and drive in the back or whatever, the whole area they use for material, they have it as their building, I guess. It's just outside.
It's fenced off, you
It's
can't really
fenced.
see it,
Yes,
but
yeah,
it's not
exactly.
visible from the parking lot or from the street.
Right. So anything they have displayed there, you have to go in the store and to go outside to see that.
I know I talked to the city administrator over in Maplewood where that store is at. And for future, I don't know if I see any big boxes in our future, but I'm still like, well, how does Maplewood like regulate that? And because it is a new store, newer store and a site, all of that was taken in consideration when the Menards was built, and even the Lowe's, which was, predated the Menards store. So they just don't, have as much proliferation with all this outdoor display area, because that was taken into consideration when the projects were first approved, whereas we're trying to go back, in time in the 1990s, so it's more challenging.
Okay, Ms. Kirkemeyer, can you also explain what the issue is with landscaping with this applicant?
So, again, our process was pretty much the same, the way it looks to me back in the 1990s. So when they submitted their plans for the project, there was older building plans that I found through our records And so it did have a landscape plan that would have been submitted with that project. And there would be some deficiencies in the landscape plan. How that, though, should be handled is through code enforcement. You know, if again, plantings need to be replaced, our department needs to be out there and just get that enforced again. So I don't know that there would have to be really any changes to that, but I did make mention that from the original plan, there would be some landscaping and some trees that would have to be replaced.
Are we happy with the current landscape plan if it's observed?
Well, I mean, in my opinion, it is fine. It's still,
Okay.
you know, adequate, so.
All right. Well, what's the thought of the commission? I don't really like, I think it's less of an industrial area right there. I mean, it's kind of the entrance to our community from the northeast there. I guess I'd prefer to have it on the south side if you'd be able to swing it. But what does everybody else think? Ms. Bilderback?
Mr. Chairman, I think that would be a good compromise to put it on the south side. I have concern with it up front for that reason. In the 1990s, this entire area was completely different, and we just redid the comp plan, and we're gradually moving some of these areas from their original use into other areas. Not saying we're doing that with the Home Depot site, but the need to be good neighbors and kind of blend in with the new things that are coming. And we've had a lot of developers and office buildings and things like that go to great expense for the aesthetics of the area. So I just have a lot of concern. Even if you fenced it off, I can't see how you could make that attractive enough right up front. Understanding that, of course, a business wants to put their stuff up front and market it, but that doesn't mean there isn't a compromise that can't work. And if they're the only one that's offering the heavy equipment anyway, people are going to know where to come for it. And I think, given how large it is, it would probably be visible if it was on the south side. That would address what Mr. Nurnberger said about the concerns about the parking, and then they would just need to figure out in their own business plan how they would do that with their other outdoor storage area. But back then, that was never intended to be used for an annex in our discussions to the garden center. So I would agree with Ms. Korkenmeyer's analysis of that, but I would like to see it on the south side. I thought that was a great idea.
Yeah, I mean, and this equipment is not, it's more of destination equipment, right? I mean, people aren't just coming and seeing a skid steer and just deciding
I
on the
drove by and I
spot.
said, I want to rent that. Yeah, but I didn't know what to use it for, but no, there's some cool stuff there. But yeah, I think it's, you know, people see it and then, I got a job coming up and I'm going to come here and maybe rent it. But yeah, I get you. Yeah, they're probably coming for that specific purpose. Once they know it's there, they're going to come and get it. I don't know the operations of this stuff, but what about the north side also? Where the tent stalls and then by the lumber opposite the lumber canopy.
I think that's well out of view with the parking structure there, too.
You'd support allowing them on the north side, too?
Yeah, I put the parking structure, I mean, if I'm remembering
that's
it
right.
correctly, you have parking structure there that would block
Yeah.
it.
It's almost 4 stories tall.
Yeah.
So is it in front now because it just sort of was the least
Well,
amount
the
of space
stall,
usage
if you
for
went to
parking?
park today, where's nobody parking?
Yeah.
That whole last quarter of the parking lot, there's nobody parking there. In addition, I'm sure it's a visibility thing that things are for rent. And so it's a sales pitch per se. But like you guys saying, once people know it's there, they'll find it. So
Ms.
So do you
Jacobs?
feel
I'm
strongly
sorry.
one way or the other about?
this is the ideal location. This is where the store manager wants it. But we're here to get it approved, and so it's not, I don't
Is he
think,
here?
no, he's not here.
Ms. Jacobs?
Well, I was just gonna mention that, like you say, that, taking that equipment away, we're left with empty parking lot, which is not really a beautiful thing to see either. So, I don't know if that's, preferable. It's not like we're pushing the landscaping back and getting a more beautiful site, or, even if there were cars, is that a great thing to see? But empty parking lot isn't beautiful either, so that's just, and I like it that it's kind of out of the way. When I go to Home Depot, it's, I don't have to mess with that at all. You know, it's not the regular traffic pattern of somebody going, but I can see it both ways, but I'm not crazy about seeing empty parking lot either.
Mr. Nuremberger?
I just had a thought, instead of having the equipment out front, have the landscaping materials out front when they can see that or whatever.
Somebody
That's
said it's an extension of the garden center. It
Yeah,
has
then
to,
you'd
it
have
has
to
to
walk
be right next to the garden
all the
center.
way across the
Yeah.
parking lot to go pay for your
And,
plant.
and I walked out there today, and they're actually watering it, and they're watering it from some, some hose bib from the garden center, so, they actually got sprinklers keeping those plants alive, when I just walked it like an hour ago. Just a thought to throw out there, those end cap landscape islands, what if we doubled the size of them to provide some additional screening of those units, and then, get some more landscaping, you have a little buffer, and then you also keep this stuff away from where everybody wants to park.
You still, so that you're contemplating still allowing the displays where they are now?
I'm just throwing it out there. I mean, it seems like there's some pros and cons of everything, but it seems like the biggest issue for your guys was screening, and, if we provided some additional screening from the road.
Well, do you think you can come up with a plan along those lines?
Yep. Is there a consensus what everybody would rather see, or, yeah, we definitely could come up with anything you guys like.
Alternatives would be good.
Who's our landscaping guy?
Andy Frankie?
Yeah, the city has a landscape
Consultant.
consultant. What would be the thought of the commission, just a straw poll? It sounds like you're pretty evenly divided as to whether to allow them to continue maintaining the equipment where they currently have it, but what would be a straw poll? Would the commission be amenable to allowing them to maintain this equipment closer to Hanley if they also agreed to significantly improve the landscaping screening between the equipment and Hanley? Are people in favor of that? Still want north and south?
I'm still, this preference, but I'm willing to look at anything.
You say the north side, I really think that that's the best place to do it, because there's a big parking garage and it looks terrible right now, but it would be better having the equipment there than anything else.
There may be a
It
concern
would
with
be
fire
behind
lanes
the
on
big-
that, though.
Yeah, let's go one by, we got minutes being taken, we got one by
Sorry.
one. All right, yes, Ms. Kirkemeyer.
So actually, the north was probably the only area that I would actually discourage, and for a couple reasons. One is because it is over in a very busy part of the parking area with the lumber canopy. That's where most of the lumber materials come from. You do have that access, that exit from McDonald's that's used quite often there at the north side of their lot. And the other thing is I actually, when I was out there one day, I mean, we're all kind of hooked on what the equipment looks like and just how much area that takes. But there are big rigs that come in and have to back up, to these different pieces of equipment to even load them and get them out of there. So if you try to put the equipment in too small of a confined area, I don't think that's going to work for the store, really, because I don't know how they're going to be able to really bring, drop off and pick up the equipment.
I guess I would be
Mr.
more.
Shipley?
I'd be more enthusiastic about supporting, hey, put the heavy equipment in front. I thought you would talk about the need for merchandising this heavy equipment because of all the online sales, and these are some products that are pretty much Amazon-proof. If you came forward and said, here is a designated area, as Mr. Moran said, it's in the front, like these shapes seem just kind of happenstance, like these green shapes here. Could you make it like a consistent in the center, maybe with some sort of barrier around it that's not a bucket with caution tape, and really neatly showcase this merchandise of this heavy equipment? I think it would make
A lot of
difference.
this equipment is towable equipment. I mean, there's trailers out there, and there's different things. People rent the equipment, bring their truck up, hook it up to their trailer. So that's why it's in a stall. It looks like a vehicle. It's a trailer. And so, they're backed up into the stalls like they are today, and some of them are smaller, but some of them are bigger, and they look exactly, take up a vehicle space, and that's why it looks like it is. It just, they're physically parked, backed up into a vehicle space, and trying to decorate, some of these guys are rookies backing stuff up, they're gonna bang into.
Well, I'm not necessarily decoration, but if it was just a designated area that had some symmetry to it, that was defined, there's car lots that look like used car lots, and there's car lots that look very neat and organized, if that were part of it.
Okay.
All right, so let's bring this to a conclusion. Here are the two options as I see them. One, require them to store this equipment on the south and/or the north side, or two, allow them to store it where it is currently, but with some significant improvements to landscape and fencing around this equipment. What would be the applicant's preference? Cost you more money to,
Costs
The
more money
latter.
up front, but I think I'd have to take that back for further review.
you talk about it?
Yeah.
Does the commission agree that those are the two options that the commission would be willing to consider? Okay, agreed? Okay, you want to take those options back to powers that be and come up with your preference?
A new site plan.
And
Okay.
if you do want the latter, the up front, if you could come up with some ideas.
And we
just
can
some-
come up with a rendering or something to
Yeah.
show you what it might look like, and if that's really what they want,
Yeah.
it's gonna cost them more money, or they just wanna put it
Right.
on the, to me, the north side, probably go drive it again. I
Good.
didn't even walk over there.
Okay.
So.
But the long and short of it is we're willing to accommodate the request to expand the CUP, but subject to these location issues.
Okay.
Good.
All right,
Okay,
thank you.
good. So we'll wait to hear back from you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, ma'am.
Can I say one thing? Just to
Yes,
clarify?
Ms. Bilderbeck.
One thing that might be helpful is because we're talking about large equipment, so when we're talking about screening, getting a sense from what it would look like from the street, like a street view or rendering, might be helpful as you take this back for consideration and talk
Yeah,
about it on that aspect.
If we come back with the front as the proposal, we'll come back with some type of rendering for you to see the view from the street. Is that,
Yes, and I'd still like to see something for how you would do it on the south side too, for how you would, if we decided that, no, we're not okay with this and we want it on the south side.
you want to see, if it's
how
on the
that-
south side, you want to see a rendering from the street?
Well, just how you would accomplish it,
Okay.
given the other materials that you're storing there about half of the year.
But that would be more of a site plan, how I accomplish it versus a rendering.
Right,
Okay.
exactly. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have one more question.
Yes, Mr.
Those
Pavazza.
few spots that are right on Hanley, is there any reason those couldn't be like stacked on that shorter stack in that row there?
Yeah, I think those are specific, if I remember, van rentals, or they had some type of truck for rental. Those were things I think they were advertising. But yes, I think they
Yeah.
could be moved to a different location.
I mean,
Where were you looking at?
well, I mean, you have those, right, the one on the right's a little shorter stack there.
Oh,
Could they
okay.
just be like an
When
extension
you're coming
of
in
that,
versus
where-
right in the middle.
Yeah, instead of right on Hanley, then they're set back into the parking lot with the other equipment.
Okay.
Mr. Nuremberger?
This is more for Lisa. Can you make sure we have a correct count about how many parking spaces based upon their use currently? Because they have 30, 40, 50 spaces being used as right now for storage of panning materials, and in the back, you can't count any of those in the back, but, because nobody parks there anyway, maybe some employees.
I think that's what this is, the 384 is the count,
Yeah, it says right
minus
here.
everything in the green, she's minus everything in the green, you get 384.
Okay, it's all?
Yeah.
Okay.
Correct. So, again, if we would say that 340 parking spaces is still sufficient, then there's
Okay.
384
I didn't
with all of
understand
them.
that, so that answers my question then,
Mm-hmm.
okay. Thank you.
So this strikes me as an issue that we could take up at the next general meeting unless, Ms. Kirkemeyer, you think that a site plan, given that he's going to come back with this narrowly tailored approach that we're looking for, do you think that we're in need of a site plan meeting?
I don't think so. Again, we're also trying to work with a a business here in town, so, I mean, we haven't applied a lot of pressure, but I think everybody agreed we needed to really wait till springtime to see how we could formulate the best plan. So I don't think there's urgency, and I do think we're gonna have other applications, so I think we're gonna have a regular July meeting anyway, so.
Okay, well, would you mind, we'll plan on taking it back up with your request and with some renderings that would, in support of your request at the July meeting?
That sounds great.
Good, well, thank you, sir.
I appreciate you guys' time.
Aldermanic report, I see no alderman. City planners report, Ms. Kirkmeyer?
I have nothing.
No need for a site plan meeting. Rationale, have no rationale to report. Any other business this evening?
Oh, I did, I guess I have one follow-up. The last case that we had with the short-term rentals, I don't know if I had sent an email, but I know the Board of Aldermen were notified. When we talked about, there was a law with the Missouri Senate that was looking at it, that also died. So there is no regulations for short-term rentals statewide, so that really didn't, impact with the ordinance that we passed, so.
Okay, great, thanks for the update. Any other business? Entertain a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Stand adjourned.
Are bees illegal in Brentwood now?
Or what?
Are
Bees?
bees illegal in Brentwood now?
Yes, they are.
Really? My
If you-
neighbor
if-
has bees, and I love it.
If you want to have them, I don't have anything to tell you you can't have them.
I don't care.
I like guys like that.
People get really upset about the, I thought we were turning them all off.
So, yeah, there's two things that we're kind of always trying to keep track of. So one is that once they get ARB approval, and there's no set time when they have to come in and get a building permit. But once they obtain the building permit, then it expires years from when it was issued. And they have to not only have the building permit, but they have to show progress. So it's kind of like very arbitrary how you want to determine it. But what also people have been concerned about is because a lot of these are tear downs and then new construction. See ya, have a good summer. Thank you. Take care. And so.
guys up at OB's.
So with the,
I should have, I didn't know we were doing that, but you're so engaged in this, I just thought you would be a great choice, so I hope I didn't catch you off
oh,
guard.
okay, okay. All right, I'll let her know.
This,
Do what? Oh, thank you. I know, I messed that one up, so, sorry.
So 1 year after the building.